Hi, I'm Ben Elowitz, and welcome back to Razor's Edge. For this episode, I had the great pleasure of sitting down with Greg Mark. Greg was the founder of Markforged and Backflip, and he has raised over $550 million across some of the toughest venture markets. He is one of the most insightful builders that I know. Here's what we talked about. Every founder knows that their fundraise is high stakes, but Greg has built a playbook of completely leaning into those stakes. I think there's this thing that the trajectory of a startup really does get set by the big milestones in the journey. And the big venture rounds, those are the biggest inflections of all that control the destiny of your company. So Greg, he treats a fundraise like it's a Formula One race, and he runs it at ridiculous speed and super high intensity. Every single juncture in the fundraise for him is a test of nerves and execution. And it's like you got to keep your hands on the wheel to avoid disaster. When you're steering toward a real tight turn, you have to be relentless and compartmentalize and focus to keep it together. And he talks about how to do that. The thing is, over time, he's also gotten even better with a whole second dimension. And you'll hear in our conversation, he has a ton of candor about managing the psychological and the relational side of venture meetings with authenticity. Greg shares a tremendous amount of empathy. And it turns out that that empathy is a secret weapon. It helps him understand the perspectives and the pressures on the other side of the table. And when Greg sits down with a venture investor, he can be truly partnering. I think you're going to find his playbook super humbling and inspiring. I know that's exactly how I felt. So please enjoy this episode with Greg Mark. Greg, thanks so much for joining today. I've been really looking forward to this conversation. You've got experience across so many areas, and you help so many entrepreneurs with their own fundraisers and their own journeys of building startups. It is not easy. I'm really appreciative of you making time today.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. It is fundraising is one of the most exhausting things founders do, because you have your whole company like squished into this like ideally couple week period, sometimes longer, but ideally couple week period. You know, it's similar to sales, it's similar to recruiting, it's similar to these things, but it's a muscle you don't frequently use. So all of a sudden you're like, what the fuck is this? And it's like, you learn by trial and error, or you find somebody to help you out.
Can't wait to talk about all that. And I think you're going to be helping out a lot of people just by having this conversation. I have a handful of questions I'd love to just rattle off with you to kind of get us in the mood here. If you had to describe your leadership style in one word, what would it be?
Intense. I think I'm most frequently, for better or worse, compared to a race car, right? And so like the good part of it is we go really, really fast. The bad part is you better hold on for dear life because it is not slow. It's not slow. It's very intense. We come into the wall fast. You think you're going to die, but then you come out fine.
Yeah, I love the expression. Statistically speaking, the world doesn't end very often.
Yeah, exactly. Not very often. I think analogies are very helpful to people. I'm a car person. I love cars. Think about being a Formula One driver. You're coming in the corner at like a life-ending speed, and you're doing it at like what they call 10/10. So you're at the hairy edge of what the car will actually do because you're competing against the other 9 best in the world people. You're coming in, and if anything goes wrong, you're fucked. So when you're a startup, man, like you're coming in that corner like really high, it's coming up real fast, right? And if you step on the brakes early, you're going to get passed. And if you step on the brakes late, you're a splat in the wall. So it's a lot. So I think startup founders have more in common with race car drivers than people understand. The focus, the concentration, and the risk, the controlled risk.
Love it. Do you have a favorite book or podcast that you'd recommend that you think almost every entrepreneur should check out?
Oh my God, Ray Dalio, Changing World Order. If you don't, Ray Dalio, you should.
Oh, I haven't read it yet.
Oh my God. This dude gets how the economic machine works. He can describe it like a machine in a way that an engineer is like, oh yeah, that's totally how this game goes, right? I would highly suggest you follow his stuff. It has been life-changing.
Speaking of amazing people, if you could collaborate with any founder or any investor, who would it be?
Dude, it'd either be Elon Musk if we're talking about somebody who's alive, or it'd be Jobs if we're talking about somebody who's dead. I don't know anybody who does it like Elon, right? And then Jobs just had like the kind of product taste that just doesn't come along.
Let's talk fundraising. Is fundraising a relationship or a transaction?
The process. It's an art, it's a science, and it is a series of relationships. And people have different styles about how they do it. It may not be the right style, but I have a style, and it has worked for myself and a lot of other people who have picked up the style.
You've got a whole playbook. I can't wait to get into it. Before we do that, when you meet a new venture investor, what's your biggest green flag in an investor, and what's your biggest red flag?
Okay. So rule number one, when you see an investor, right, they took the meeting for one of two reasons. One end of it is they've got a thesis around the space you're doing, and they think that that's cool, and they want to do this thing, and they're excited about it. Option number two, FOMO. They're like, yo, this hot deal's going around. I don't want to be the last person to see the deal. I want to see the deal, okay? The first person, they're leaning forward, they're talking to you, they're engaged, they're excited, they're asking really detailed questions about what you do, who you sell it to, why you, what the team's good. Like, they're going down the list. You can see them building a model in their head of how you fit compared to other founders they've met before. Okay. Mr. FOMO is like, they want to see the pitch. They want to show their partners the pitch. Who else have you talked to? What do you think about raising for this? They've got a bunch of questions about the process, who who else is interested. They don't care about your product. They don't care about your team. They're just kind of like, they're in the gossip. Okay. If you're talking to the gossip person, run. Respectfully, you're wasting both of your time, right? You're wasting both of your time. And the only reason they took the meeting was to tell other people they took the meeting and maybe that they passed on it, right?
You've raised a lot of rounds. I'm curious for your energy. Do you love fundraising or do you dread it?
Both. There's two kinds of rounds. So when your company is hot, fundraising, you're the Ferrari. You're the fucking Ferrari 250 fucking Testarossa that they made 19 of, that everybody wants, that people are paying 40 million, now 50 million, now 60 million. You're that person, okay? Or you're hanging on for dear life and you're going to have to scrap your way through this thing because you're in 3D printing and the industry just crashed. The two companies that were valued at 5 billion are now valued at 1 billion. You are fucked, okay? And so like when it's that, oh man, it's not fun. And when it's this, oh, it's great, right? It's great. And the thing is, so it's what I would say is I look forward to the intensity. I look forward to the focus. I try to do it very quickly, right? You don't want to have a protracted fundraising process because it's a major distraction. You're going to basically put the business on pause and you want to go really fast and you want to answer everybody's questions and you want to be really thoughtful and you want to get the entire thing done ideally in 2 weeks, maximum 3, right? So every 12 to 18 months, you're doing 2 weeks of fucking fundraising.
You've raised, hundreds of millions of dollars. How much capital have you raised?
500-600 million. I stopped keeping track.
I could recap all that for everybody, but I actually think something that's more interesting and more fun. When you walk into a meeting, you've got a pretty short window to establish credibility. And I have a hunch that you have a way to kind of get the buyer in the mode, to get the investor in the mode of saying, okay, I should take this seriously. Introduce yourself the way you would introduce yourself to an investor.
Tell them the things that are on the checklist that build credibility, right? So for me, hi, Greg Mark, undergrad and master's at MIT, right? And then pick the nuggets so MIT, credibility. Okay, I'm obviously not stupid. I would say, I'm the founder of Backflip. We do 3D generative AI. So we're going to use AI to design all the things around you, from like the computer you're using to the cell phone in your pocket to the car that just drove up, And in a previous life, I founded Markforged, came from an idea from my kitchen to 3D print carbon fiber, took it public. So we've been in this space before. We know these people, basically selling a very similar product to the same people in the same space, right? Pick the nuggets that paint the constellation that says this is an investable thing.
You're using every every moment carefully. Say, like, look, what really matters for setting this impression of an investable CEO with founder market fit here?
Yeah. And what you're doing, you're making a movie. Okay. And we're all consumers of content, right? And some people, like Mr. Beast, make content that everybody wants to watch. And then 7.9 billion other people don't make content that most people want to watch. Okay. If you want to be good at fundraising, you have to make content a VC wants to watch, right? So it has to be an interesting story, an engaging story. They have to figure out how they're going to change the world and how they're going to return their fund on it. So quick, let me ask you a question. All right. Why is the VC there? Why is the VC there? Why are they in their room? What's their job? The VC job is a sales funnel. Okay. 2,000 meetings a year. Okay. Probably 200 that they get really excited about. And they spend a huge amount of time doing diligence, investigating, 20 that get to the final stage where they're like, fuck, are we going to go through, we're going to put it through investment committee. We're going to pitch all the partners on it. We're going to do and then 2 checks they write. Okay. So if it goes from 2,000 down to 2. All right. And when they write those checks, when they push that button, okay, they're betting their career on it. Every time. You walk in there as the entrepreneur, you're like, oh, I'm at a bank and they just have a mountain of cash in the back. And if they just understood my technology, they would give me access to this mountain of cash and I will go build fill in the blank, whatever you want to do. Right. But the reality is you're talking to a person who is as scared as you, who has a pile of cash, but they only have 2 withdrawals a year. And if they make the wrong 2 withdrawals, they're getting fired. And they've got to return the fund. And if they fuck up, they've got to justify to the LPs, which is the CalPERS pension fund, Harvard, Stanford, MIT, why the fuck they picked you, right? And so you walk in there as the entrepreneur and you're thinking about you're telling your story, you're pitching your product, hopefully you're pitching your company. On the other side of the table is somebody who's like, am I going to return the fund or am I going to get fired by doing this deal? And I'm going to listen to 1,999 of these this year. By the way, as an entrepreneur, go be an angel investor. Go be an angel investor for a hot minute. If you can afford it, put 25 grand, put 5 grand, put 10, put some money to somebody else's company. Go listen to 20 pitches. You will understand the other side of the equation.
So let's go back in time. You're raising your first seed round for Markforged.
Uh-huh.
What did you know about fundraising? What did you try? What worked and what didn't work?
I knew nothing about fundraising. I knew about sales, right? Darbeloff, my mentor, had taught me sales. So I knew enough about humans to be dangerous, right? It wasn't like now I can listen to the blogs, man. Listen to the Y Combinator blog. There's a bunch of people who blog about fundraising. It's like, there's so much information now. Like, it's great. 10, 12 years ago, crickets, right? Especially on the East Coast, right? So I had a friend who bought one of our race car rings at Air Emotions, who became a friend of mine, Brian Nadeau, who was a seed investor, was the first money in. And he got, I think he or somebody else I knew got me my first safe note, right? But it wasn't called a safe at the time. And I was like, okay, how do the terms work, dude? Right? So the first answer to your question is, find somebody you trust who has some amount of money and is not an asshole, right? Somebody who when they meet you, if they determine that you're the golden goose, instead of trying to lock you in a pen and steal all your eggs, they see themselves in you and they're like, oh, I like this person. I like what they're doing. I want to help them. When you're an entrepreneur, you will meet people who try to take advantage of you and people who want to help you. If you find somebody who wants to help you, ideally, if they see part of themselves in you, that's the person you want to hang out with. And Brian helped the shit out of us.
So let's talk about what you were like when you went out for that first round, not having gotten to have any street experience yet. What did you find?
We raised one round. I raised the seed round in Boston, and then we did the A there, kind of, because we pre-sold the C because we made a mistake because I didn't have a good person to teach me this thing. We did the B, the C in the West Coast. We did the D back in Boston, right? And then we did the road show during COVID. So it was Zoom and it was like bananas, right? But for the road show for Markforged, at the time Desktop Metal had gone public. They were sitting as like a $6 billion company. And for the first time, they'd actually had to publicly disclose how much they hadn't sold and how bad their margins were. So we told a story, and by the time we got to the finance slide, people would just like, shut up and take our money, right? It was like 3 or 4x oversubscribed. There was like 850 million of demand, almost $1 billion of demand. It was nuts, because if you believe that desktop metal is trading at $6 billion, and if you're like, fuck, you give it a haircut, like we outperformed them on every metric calculatable, right? Like they were like negative 127 points gross margin. We were positive 64.5 points gross margin. We were the highest margin 3D printing company that anyone had ever seen, right? So by the time we got to, people were just like, please take the money.
We talked about how there's easy rounds and hard rounds.
Yeah.
And tell me about one of the hard rounds.
So when I started Markforged, there were 2 publicly traded $5 billion 3D printing companies. And then a month before our B round, they both crashed from 5 to 1. Right? The stock market didn't crash. 3D printing crashed. So it was worse. When the stock market crashes, seasoned investors know it's a great time to buy. When the industry you're in crashes, and just the industry you're in crashes, everybody runs for the hills. This is not a safe time to deploy capital, right? Now, what did we do? That's why I met Gus, right? We pitched a bunch of investors, right? Gus was friends of like Antonio, our first investors. And so we had a warm intro. We pitched Gus. And Gus was a intelligent and reasonable person. He saw that like, hey, he'd get it at a reasonable price, right? That there was something here. And so we raised a painfully dilutive round, because not anything against Gus, it was just that was the market condition at the time. And then Gus, when he came to the first board meeting, he was like, man, I got a great deal. He's like, usually the board meeting, we usually call it the meeting of 3 shits, where you find out the 3 things that the entrepreneur, didn't really tell you when he sold you that used car. He's like, but this is way better than I thought. And he was happy to pitch. And I was like, fuck, I left a lot of money on the table, right? That was our B round. It was painful for me. But worse, it was painful for all of our employees. It was painful for people who thought we were going to raise at a higher rate. So what happened is the business is either growing like a weed or shrinking. Okay, either a tailwind or a headwind. It's never just neutral. You're never treading water. It's either headwind or tailwind. That was a huge tailwind. And Gus, saved our ass, right?
And Gus Kai is amazing. And like you said, incredibly rational and intelligent and savvy and level-headed. One part is you've got the right investor, but I'm kind of curious, Greg, from having gone through that experience, what made it into your playbook that you did right, or things you did wrong and thought, okay, I got to change that in my playbook? Because you played a part in that too. What was it that made you investable even against an adverse current?
Dude, I've always had one skill. And the one skill that I have is I make good technology. So our 3D printers, they worked like a motherfucker, right? They worked really well. Formlabs, which is, I believe, a great company. They're the last of the great American 3D printing companies. They had a 30% return rate for their first printer. And everybody knew it, right? We had 3 returned out of the first 1,000, right? Like nobody returned our printer. People would tell you they didn't like it, but they wouldn't fucking ship it back. They wouldn't ship it back. They didn't want their money back. You called them up and you're like, hey, it seems like you don't like this thing. Do you want me to buy it off? They're like, no, keeping it. We made a good product, right? There's a lot of things you have to do. There's a lot of things you have to do to be a good entrepreneur. But at the end of the day, you've got 2 options. You can either be Elizabeth Holmes and you can sell a vision and not have a product, or you can make a good fucking product, right? And I was in the good fucking product category, right?
You talked about competition. Are you somebody who pays attention to your competition, or is someone who says, no, I'm just going to focus on my own and disregard the competition? How do you look at it?
So the only thing you need to know about your competition is how to answer questions that your investors are going to ask for fundraising, how to answer the positioning questions about why you versus them, right? Dude, when you walk into a Ferrari dealer, again, do they tell you how much more horsepower it has in a Lamborghini? No. Okay? You should never, ever, ever talk about your competition, right? They got to drag it out of you. Dude, this is a funny story. We had a 95% win rate at Markforged in enterprise sales against desktop metal, right? And it was the same thing every time. 5 execs would get on the corporate jet. They fly to Boston because at the time, Boston was the hub of 3D printing. Kind of still is, right? And they'd go meet Desktop Metal, and the CEO of Desktop Metal would talk about Markforged constantly and how they were better than Markforged, how they were different than Markforged, and da-da-da-da. Whenever the company was coming out, he always wanted to go first, okay? And, he'd show the big building, how much money they spent, da-da-da. And then they'd come to us, and we're in this tiny little building, right? They'd come in there, we would mention him 0 times, right? And they'd come in there, and we would show them the products. We'd show them, this is what we make. And now, by the way, we're selling to my people. This is like the VP of engineering for Toyota, for GM, for like Harley Davidson, for like Embraer, for Lockheed, okay? So we're showing them the products, and they can tell that I love the fucking printer. They can tell that I had a strong hand in designing the printer, and I'm showing them why we made the design decisions we made, okay? And they may not know about 3D printing, but they know the fuck out of mechanical engineering. And they look at the design decisions, and there's like, I don't know if this guy knows 3D printing, but this motherfucker knows mechanical engineering. That printer is rock solid, right? And they're like, okay. And then they all ask the same questions. So there's a trick. There's a trick in fundraising. Every investor is going to ask you the same questions, right? And it's not the exact same. There might be, a few here and a few there, but when you overlap them, they're all asking you the same questions because they were all trained the same way. They're all friends. They were all at one point or other were in basically the same overlapping funds, okay? And you as a founder, you left shit out of your presentation that you need to have in there, and they're just telling you the shit you left out, the part of the movie that doesn't make sense, okay? Imagine you watched a bad movie, all right? You watched a murder mystery movie, and you're like, that's not how life works. That character would never have... That's what they're asking you those questions. They're like, hey, in the movie you just showed me, this is really what doesn't make sense in your movie, right? When we would do the tour, and they'd ask me all the same questions, I'm like, these are the objections. This is the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, the FUD that the competitor is saying about our products. And so then I would just answer those questions affirmatively before they asked when showing the printers, this is why we made the design decisions we made for the printer.
Let's talk about those investor questions, though. Like investors, part of their job is to push back and have some skepticism. How do you handle that on the fundraising side? When an investor has that pushback, do you ever try to change a no to a yes? Do you accept it? Do you argue with it? Or do you get under it and try to work with them? What's your approach?
Okay, so first piece of advice, going back to your previous question, first piece of advice. You learn fundraising from the founders and the venture capitalists that you meet along the way. Okay, so the founders are the people like me who want to help you. And the venture capitalists, turns out most of them are good people. Like the vast majority of them. Like I said, they're seeing 2,000 pitches a year. They're exhausted too, right? But they're good people. They love what they do. They actually kind of want to help you. So I have gotten more great investment advice, like learning how to fundraise advice, from venture capitalists than probably anybody else. Okay, so here's what happens. Stage 1, you pitch the VC you're talking to. Stage 2, they come back, they've got more questions, they're getting excited about the deal. You're going down that funnel. You're going from the 2,000 to the 200 to the 20. Okay. Then they're going to bring you to the investment committee. Okay. They're going to show their partners this thing. They don't want to waste their partners' time. They want to help you. Now they're on your side of the table, actually. When you go and you pitch IC, the partner who's backing you is on your side of the table, and the two of you are pitching their firm. Okay. I have had investors go through my deck and be like, whoa, Greg, let me fix. And in fact, when I started raising money, we do the seed round, and that went through the deck line by line. I'm like, slide by slide. This is good. This is bad. Da, da, da. A round. I had an investor who founded the fund, loved the idea, told me up front, it's not usually the kind of thing that we're going to do. He's like, but we should. And with his 20 or 30 years of industry experience, he went down slide by slide and he pitched me my deck like a rock star.
How do you advise entrepreneurs to take advantage of that dynamic? What do you tell them to do?
Make fucking friends with the investors. Make fucking friends. Be nice to them. Don't be an asshole. Spend the time. Do the homework. Understand who are you talking to? What do they invest in? Don't waste their time. Okay? Before you go talk to an investor, go get advice from 10 fucking founders Do not waste their time. 1. 2, make a movie they want to watch. Pitch your pitch to every first person you know. Pitch your pitch to your dog, your cat, the fucking mailman, the barista. The barista at Starbucks, she's pitched Sequoia. Okay. On the side, she's got a startup. Pitch her. And then don't be someone you're not. Okay. People buy authenticity. Just be you. People buy authenticity. Okay. If they're not going to invest, you have 2 options. If they're not going to invest, you can leave there completely confident and like make them regret it. Right. But if you found somebody who's a gem and a good person, you can ask them, you can say, hey, this seems like it's not like the right fit for you. Okay. But as a person in this ecosystem, like who, we just spent the last 45 minutes talking about this, can you give me some advice for the next one?
Yeah.
Right? Can you give me some advice? Can you give me like 30 seconds of advice for the next one? You cannot go into it sad and low confidence, or you will shoot you around in the foot. Nobody wants to invest in the person who's like, please help me. Okay. No. Okay. But you can, with compassion and integrity, ask for one favor. And the one favor is, I just sucked up 45 minutes of your time then you're not going to invest. Understand in your heart, you just wasted their time. Okay. And now you're asking for a favor on top of already pitching them. And you're asking it nicely and compassionately. And you're saying, hey, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate the time. I know you're crazy busy and you probably got 20 other pitches today. Could you spend 30 seconds giving me your most honest input for how I can make this the more compelling pitch for the next investor that we talk to? Right?
Is asking for feedback like that part of your playbook when you get to meet investors?
Good question. Usually further in the relationship. So I can usually get to the second meeting or the third meeting, right? And it's like, okay, it's like dating. It's a lot of things in life. A lot of social interactions are very similar, okay? Because when we go about a social interaction, like what is a pattern that you compare it to? Fundraising is like dating, okay? It is like dating. By the way, it's not a one-night stand. You are getting married, okay? When the investor pushes that button, they're marrying you. You don't realize that. You just got married. You think you're raising money? No, dude. That person is on your board. They live in your house. You share space. You have joint custody of everything you guys own. You're getting married. When you find somebody who is like, man, maybe in a different time sequence we would have gotten married, that's the person you ask. Don't ask the person who like, man, I would never marry you in a million years. You are not my type. I do not like the way you talk. I do not like, dude, respectfully leave. If you met, you formed a relationship and they liked you and they've respectfully ask them to give you advice to the next meeting.
You mentor a lot of entrepreneurs, and one of the things that people seek you out for is fundraising advice and coaching. As you work with entrepreneurs, what are some of the most important things? You've talked about fundraising as a process. What does a good process look like when you're coaching an entrepreneur?
Okay, I'm like a fucking fire hose. So the first thing is like, this is a process that needs to happen in 2 weeks. Okay. What you're doing is you're making a movie. Okay. You're making a movie. You're making an entertaining documentary that people want to watch and is going to win Emmy fucking awards and is going to be all over the place. Okay. So you better practice your pitch. You better get your pitch. We talked about that. Okay. Then you need to line up all the meetings to be in a very tight sequence. Okay. Let's say you have like a month. Okay. First week is reach out. And you want a warm introduction. So you want to find, use LinkedIn. This is where LinkedIn becomes magic. And you got to find a friend of a friend who knows that investor, right? You want a warm introduction to that investor. If you can, you make a spreadsheet. You have every investor written on the spreadsheet. It's a process. Ideally, you find a warm introduction. Ideally, if you can't find a warm introduction, you literally LinkedIn them, you cold email them, you fucking show up. You find a way in, okay? And you start with a few coffee chats. Okay, you're not fundraising yet. You're going out for coffee. A coffee chat there's 2 modes here. Coffee chat, I'm having a verbal conversation with you. Usually we'll be at a fucking Starbucks. Okay, and you got to practice, giving your pitch at the Starbucks because it's going to be loud and you're going to hear all sorts of shit and you got to focus, okay? And in your coffee chat, that investor, they don't want to watch a movie for 45 minutes. They want to have coffee for 15 minutes or 5 minutes. And so you're saying, hey, here's my idea. Here's what I'm thinking. And you're pitching your business and you're asking them for advice, okay? And they're going to give you those 8 questions that you got wrong on your movie. They're going to give you feedback on that. That's week 1, maybe week 2, right? And you want to have like 2 to 5 of those, right? And then if the movie is bad and nobody likes the movie, right? Abort fundraising. Go back to the beginning and get your movie right. And you will be in this zone of coffee chatting until you start getting people like, oh, I like this. Okay. Once you're in that zone, people are like, oh, I like this. Okay. Now you want to line up every meeting in 2 weeks, right? Maximum 3. And you line them up because a few things happen. Like I said before, one, you got to stop running the business. I don't care that your customers are screaming. I don't care that somebody just quit. You have the whole entire fucking thing's happening. Okay. That's all on pause. You're 100% focused on fundraising and you're doing it in a 3-week period. Okay. Why? Now you're pitching your first investor. Okay. You've got 3 pitches on Monday. You've got 5 pitches on Tuesday. Okay. Between your pitches, you're changing your pitch. You're updating your pitch. You're changing the tires while the car's racing. All right. Some of those people are going to get excited. That excitement turns into momentum. You got to light a fire. Okay. If you take 5 sticks and you spread them out over 3 months and you put a spark on each stick, none of them will catch on fire. Okay. So you put 20 investor meetings into a pile and you throw sparks on them. Okay. Because the little heat that one starts giving off is going to heat up the other one. You need to build momentum by trying to get all the sticks. 15 of those sticks are soggy wood. 5 of them can light on fire. Okay. And you're sitting there with fucking flint. You got flint. Okay. So if they're by themselves, they won't catch on fire. If they're together, you'll get your story right. You'll have momentum. You'll be a hot deal people are talking about. And all of a sudden, with the people who said no, when they tell their friends, hey, have you seen this deal? Have you seen this deal? Saw this deal? Da, 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 da. Okay. Everybody's talking about your deal for 2 weeks. After that 2 weeks, you've either done a deal or you're yesterday's news and nobody gives a shit. You got 15 minutes of fame. Do it all in 2 weeks. And you're bubble sorting, you're rank sorting these investors. When you find the top few who actually like you, like the idea, and they have the ability to write the check, when you line those things up, pick your top few and focus like fuck. You're not doing 5 deals, you're doing 1 deal. Sometimes you'll put a syndicate together. But if your deal's so hot, you're putting a syndicate together, you don't need my advice. Okay. If you're trying to get that 1 check, okay, then you're focusing on those top few people and you're like your primary plan, you have your secondary plan, you have ideally your third plan. The last thing I'll say on this is, it is always worth taking a slight discount for the right fucking investor.
Yeah. A lot of people focus on getting the auction and how do I get top dollar? And I have a lot of experiences that is not the most important thing. And I think a lot of our friends do as well.
So our Aaron investor for Backflips, Lila, she's at NEA. Badass founder called me up. She made the intro. And he's like, tell me about working with her. I'm like, dude, first of all, she's fucking badass. She's really smart. She's an AI engineer. She's fucking run a company. She was CEO of Wikipedia. She was deputy CTO for Microsoft. She brought in the open AI things. Like I went down this entire list of things. I'm like, she's thoughtful. She's rational. She learns fast. She the entire thing. And she's succinct in communication back. She's like fucking wonderful. Right. And so I explain who she is. Okay. And he's like, then he explains the conundrum. He's like, I'm getting a much higher round somewhere else. I'm like, okay, here's the deal, dude. It's helpful and not helpful. Okay. The helpful part is I'm like, dude, if you said, would you take a 10% discount for Lila all day, every fucking day, take that fucking deal. Okay. Like you won't miss the other 10%. 50% discount, nobody's worth 50%. Right. Somewhere in there lays the reality. Okay. Why am I telling you this? Exactly like you said, Ben. Like when you're doing your first round at the beginning, what you're buying from the investor as a founder, what you think you're getting is money. And that's a commodity. So you're like, I just want to get as much of that commodity for as little dilution as possible. What you're really doing is you're getting fucking married. You're getting married. You're going to live with this person, right? When you start out in the seed round, you drive that race car by yourself. Okay. And you can do whatever you want. You drive as fast as you want, and you're going to win and lose on you. Okay. When you get to your C round, you've got a board around you. You are one of the voting members of your company. If you want that race car to go around that corner at high velocity and win, you all better be doing the same thing right. You got 5 hands on the wheel, okay? And you watch a race car driver, you watch fucking Lewis Hamilton, he's not taking a turf like your fucking grandma. He's threading the needle the entire time. He's like pulling the corner, he's sliding out, he's releasing, he's pulling the corner, he's like, He's on the hairy edge of hitting that wall every fucking turn. That is how you're going to be running that company. And all of your board members, they're going to have a hand on the wheel. If they freak out and hold the wheel, you're all going to hit the wall. If they have their own crazy idea, they're going to drive you into the wall, right? Like, this is literally, you need people who will look around and tell you what's going on. There's oil on the track over there. The tire pressure is doing this. We will give you good advice, but who will let you steer the car. Right?
Yeah. Well, I think that's the job of the entrepreneur. The entrepreneur is a movie director, taking in all that advice, all the data, all the sources, looking at it from every angle and trying to figure out, based on all of the best of their experience and with open ears and open eyes, how do I shoot that next shot? Where do I point the camera? How do I direct the action? How do I make this happen?
So Ben, that's a great point. So many entrepreneurs believe or think that they're fucking, Tom Cruise or Brad Pitt. You think the story of the movie is about you, right? The reality is you're the fucking director, right? You need to get the right people on the bus. You're putting the band together. You're doing the thing, And the reality is, like, when we think of like a Steve Jobs or Elon, you think of the front person, right? But like Apple isn't one Steve, it was two Steves, right? And then Apple wasn't just two Steves. Apple was like, when Jobs came back and had to get his entire board to resign, okay, you don't get your board to resign by baking them cookies and giving them lemonade, right? You get them to resign by showing them a movie so compelling, they quit their fucking jobs. That's being the director.
And back to the product that they're buying. In the early stages, the pre-seed, it's largely the founder. But when you get to a series A, B, C, D, the product they're buying is the whole company. And you are there to present that company like a world-class director. But it's not all about you, right? It's about how you convey this company that makes it so good, it's worth going out on that limb for to invest in.
You have to look at the entire company like a product. Okay, the company is a product. You're part of the product. The team is the product. The idea is the product. The resellers are the product. The channel is the product. The previous investors you have are the products. We think that we sell a product. Okay, when you're fundraising, you have to shift your mind. Or when I was Markforged, we're no longer selling 3D printers. We're selling a company that makes 3D printers. And let me put a thing on that. My mentor once told me, you want to be the golden goose, not the egg. Okay? So when you're selling to a customer, you're like, I have a golden egg. I want you to buy this golden egg. All right? When you're selling to an investor, you're like, I'm the golden goose. This company is the golden goose. I want you to buy the goose. And a lot of founders, they go to the investor and they're like, well, let me tell you how great this fucking egg is. Let me tell you how beautiful this egg is, how it's a Fabergé egg. It's like shiny, it's beautiful, it's solid gold, the great hedge against economic inflation. And they're like, yeah, but what does it cost to feed the goose that lays the egg? Where does she sleep? Is she stable? Does she have a vision of the future? All of a sudden, the business is the product. And founders have to wrap their head around that. So when you're, exactly to your point, when you're doing the seed round, you're a mime on the street in Paris with a cup. Right? And you better, or you're a magician on the street in Paris with a cup. And you better have some funny tricks or you're not going to get to the next round. Okay. Right. Then you're like a comedian at a small comedy club. You're telling some jokes. Okay. Then you're fucking like HBO. Right. Then you're Netflix. Right. It's like when the company is small, you're like a band of one. You are the product. Right. When there's like 1,000 of you, 5,000 of you, 10,000 of you, you are 1/10,000th of the product, right? It's not about you. It's about the system. It's about the machine you built, right? So being a hardware person, at Markforged, we did hardware, software, materials, electrical, right? We built a machine. We built a printer. But then really we built a machine to make printers, right? Which is like contract manufactured. And really we built a machine to design, make, sell, service, support, market printers. Right. So like that thing that you're selling, the scope of that movie, you're going from a one-liner joke to a 5-minute skit to a 10-minute like miniseries to a feature-length movie to a series of John Wick 1 through 4. Right. And at each point you're selling like In the beginning, you're selling a funny joke. At the end, you're selling a franchise.
I'm curious for you personally, kind of having started and figuring it out the hard way on your first rounds to now where you've got hundreds of millions of dollars of capital raised under your belt and you're helping entrepreneurs. You've got a strong point of view about what good looks like. Kind of curious for you, Greg, on the inside, how have you changed and grown in your own outlook toward investors and raising capital? What's that transformation been like for you personally, where you can see yourself having gained skills or moved or changed?
The older I get, the more I love people. So on the one hand, we're all incredibly unique. It's amazing. We're like amazingly unique. Okay. On the other hand, we're all really the same. Now, when I go meet an investor, I'm like, man, you are doing your best. You have a job to do. You're exhausted. You're going to hear 2,000 pitches this year. Like of those 2,000 pitches, everyone knows is like 1 out of 10 will return the fund. 70% will go to zero. You have a really hard job. So the empathy, what has changed is the empathy for me, and the kind of love for the person sitting across the table. There are really very few bad people. And as an entrepreneur, because it's so hard and you have all these challenges, you can become disenfranchised or disheartened. And then there are times where you think the person on the other side of the table, is mean or bad or these negative words with negative association. No, man, they're doing their best. They're doing their best. And the older you get, the more you realize everybody on this planet, by and large, is just trying to do their best. And it's kind of a beautiful thing.
The way you talk about that, I have a hunch that your own growth and change and kind of movement of appreciating that with so much empathy that probably has a fair amount to do with how successful you are at fundraising now. I think that self-improvement and self-growth is a core part of the journey. When I advise at Fundraise, I'm not there to just talk about the positioning of the company or the magic slide or the magic answer to the tough Q&A. In fact, we won't even work with anybody unless they're willing to go to a personal level and say self-improvement and personal coaching has to be on the line because it's the CEO skill.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, when you meet with younger entrepreneurs or up-and-coming entrepreneurs, do you have like a golden rule or any advice that might help them on that personal side of like, how can they move in that journey toward the kind of appreciation that you have now?
Oh, man. Here's the thing, though. I don't know if you're going to like this. You might not like this. Here's the thing. You have to be hard in the beginning to be soft in the end. Okay? So what does that mean? Markforged Greg was a stone cold killer. And if he was anything but a stone cold killer, that company would have died. That company would have fucking died, right? That guy had to compartmentalize everything away in order to build that business, okay? Now I'm in a different phase of life. The problem is you got to shut off parts of the empathy while you're building a company. You get to fire people and it's painful, right? And if you can't fire people, you can't build a business, right? So you have to shut off parts of the empathy, which is part of the thing, okay? But then as you get up the curve, as you get better, it turns out that you like shrunk to squeeze through a narrow passage. But when you get to the other side of that passage, if you get there, you get to open up a lot because all of a sudden you're not dodging individual bullets that are coming after you, right? Instead of being a soldier who's trying to fight through enemy lines, okay, you're a peacekeeper trying to avoid war in the first place. So when I fundraise now, or when I build a business now, when I talk to people now, I think to myself, like, what is the optimal solution for humanity? We got here by standing on the shoulders of giants. Okay. When we leave, the magic of humanity is we all integrate on top of each other for 300,000 years and we're here. And if we have another 300,000 years of integration of that, we're going to be cruising through the fucking stars at like warp 9. It's going to be cooler than fuck. Okay. But I think you have to shut down parts of the empathy in order to be able to focus it. When I had to shut it down, I could, but then like to really understand the person on the other side of the table. Right. And I'll tell you, if you want to know, there's a LinkedIn post I posted on LinkedIn after I left Markforged, and it was very much from the heart. I think you should always do things from the heart because otherwise your life wasn't worth living. But, when I was running the company, I was always thinking about the next product, the next technology, like what we were doing. We were a product company. We made products. Okay. The second I stopped that, when I looked back, all I saw was people. Like, I forgot about every printer we made. I forgot about every part that ever got assembled. All I saw were the people who built the printers next to me, the people who sold the printers with me, the customers who used the printers, the customers who made cool shit. I couldn't, if you asked me, I couldn't even remember where the fuck the parts even went. But the people who made the parts, I can tell you everything about them.
That's a beautiful note. Thank you. And thanks for getting personal with that. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, my pleasure, Ben.
Greg, this has been a blast. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. I have huge thanks to Greg. He brought a ton of intensity, but he also really brought honesty and wisdom to the table as we talked about what it's like to raise venture money. I found this conversation super empowering. And that's a big deal. Most founders, when they're raising money, feel disempowered. They feel like they are at the behest of these powerful investors who get all the control, get to make all the decisions. And Greg had this metaphor that you are the director of the movie, or you are the driver of a Formula One car in a race. And he does that all while keeping empathy and appreciation. This is a great way to flip the script on the usual dynamics between a founder and an investor. And by the way, this is also what I've seen over and over and over top fundraisers do differently from the rest so that they can be in control of their own fundraise. And as a bonus, I don't think I've ever felt like I have so much in common with a Formula One driver as I do now. And I'm going to love thinking about how the magic happens in these wild high-speed turns during a fundraise process with the people around you as a pit crew to keep you grounded throughout. So if you enjoyed this, hey, please like and subscribe and all that stuff. And please join me again next time on Razor's Edge.